So thank you, Prakash sir, and the panel for giving me this opportunity to be a speaker in this very confusing and extremely common topic, particularly in India, that is allergic conjunctivitis. So allergic conjunctivitis can be divided into two categories. The first category can be acute and the second can be chronic. In the acute, we can have seasonal allergic conjunctivitis and the perennial allergic conjunctivitis. And the chronic variety can include vernal keratoconjunctivitis, atopic keratoconjunctivitis, and giant papillary conjunctivitis. So let's take each of these entities one by one, and I'll first start off with seasonal and the perennial allergic conjunctivitis. So the SAC or the PAC, that is the seasonal and the perennial allergic conjunctivitis, are some of the most common medical conditions in the world, and they generally are associated with watering, redness, and itching. However, the symptoms are very mild, and the age group that is affected are generally children and young adults. I repeat, children and young adults. So SAC, that is the seasonal one, occurs generally on exposure to outdoor allergens which peak at certain times of the year, and these are like pollen from trees, flowers or grasses, and generally this is seen in spring and summer. Generally, if you take for India, April and June are the months, and we have the perennial variety, which is basically due to the indoor allergens that are seen throughout the year. These can be dust mites, pet or pest, dander, feathers, fungi, mold. So these two entities have a mechanism of pathogenesis generally because of type 1 hypersensitivity. So what happens over here is that if you look at the figure over here, see the first exposure results, the body forms immunoglobulin E specific for that allergen. So on the conjunctival surface, any allergen or even the parasite, they have a similar mechanism, which I will explain later. So this allergen gains entry inside the conjunctival epithelium, and basically when this first exposure occurs, the immunoglobulin E is produced. So on what happens is, on repeated exposure, this IgE molecule binds to the Fc receptor antibodies. If you can see what I'm showing with the arrow, of part of the mast cell of the conjunctiva. So again, after repeated exposure, what happens is when this happens, this binding takes place, these mast cells get activated. And the activation of these mast cells produces inflammatory mediators such as histamine, which is the predominant type, and prostaglandins and leukotrienes. But mainly is the histamine. These result in vasodilatation and increased vascular permeability, which results in immediate itching and redness, which is the reason by which the patients present to us. Along with this recruits other disease effector cells, and result of which it enters inside the vascular endothelium, and these, as I said, these problems occur. So 4 histamine receptors have been described. We have the H1 variety, we have the H2 varieties. These are the ones that are responsible for the allergy response. H3 is involved in the CNS negative feedback mechanism, and H4 is a chemotaxis of mast cells and eosinophils and is a target for future therapies. So not going into too much detail over here, I'll just say that there are 2 types of T helper cells also in the immune system in relation to allergic conjunctivitis. The Th1 acts against the bacteria and small protozoa, whereas Th2 against the helminths and the other extracellular parasites. However, the allergic response is actually the abrogation or the overactivity of this Th2 response, which occurs as a general defense mechanism in parasites. So basically, as I said, these symptoms of these people they have waxing and waning nature, bilateral itching, redness, they have a clear watery discharge, and therefore thorough history with special attention has to be made regarding the onset, duration, laterality, nature of discharge, and the presence of systemic allergic symptoms. Severe pain is not characteristic of it. For past medical history, you should ask for nasal congestion, atopy, and asthma. There's a strong family history association, and social history can give you clues regarding possible occupational exposure or the secondhand smoke exposure. On examination, the lids may be edematous. Conjunctiva may show congestion plus minus chemosis. You can have, sometimes because of severe chemosis, you can have a Dellen formation. Mild papillae are seen and follicles are rare. The corneal involvement is absent in such conditions. So the diagnosis is mainly clinically and on the basis of the signs and symptoms that I have said. And the treatment is divided into three types. First is the avoidance of the allergen, then the topical management, and the systemic therapy. So the avoidance of the allergen for seasonal variety, you have to stay indoors. You have to protect against the pollen. You can use air conditioners, and if you're using a car, if you're driving a car, close the windows and turn on the AC. For the perennial variety, you have to, if you have a carpeted floor, remove it, do a regular cleaning of the household. The fungus, any sources of fungus has to be removed. A good option can be the use of air purifiers, which are available in the market nowadays. And if you have any pets, if the problem is persisting, you might have to get them removed. So coming to the topical management, it consists of various medicines available from artificial tears. My preferred treatment for my choice for artificial tears in such conditions is CMC 0.5% and 1%. We have the anti-allergics, which are the histamine blockers and the mast cell stabilizers. Histamine blockers, example would be alcaftidine and buponastine and epinastine, and these generally work within minutes or hours. And the mast cell stabilizers include cromolyn, sodium, hydrochromil, and they take 1 to 2 weeks to have an effect. So therefore, the histamine blockers are generally the first line, and mast cell stabilizers can be the second line. However, there are drugs like olopatadine, which have a dual action and therefore are preferred, such as 0.1% has a BD dose and 0.2% of olopatadine has a OD dose. Other supportive measures you can add are the alpha agonists like nafazoline, which is a vasoconstrictor. However, you have to take care of the systemic side effects of such drugs. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ketorolac have also been commonly used by people. However, you have to take care if there is any corneal problem. You should not use ketorolac because the chances of corneal melting have been reported with the use of this drug. For severe forms, you need to go for drugs such as steroids. So generally in these two mild varieties, that is the SAC and the PAC, you can go for loteprednol 0.5% or fluorometholone drops. You can start from 4 times a day and then taper it off. For steroid sparing agents can be used also, particularly in cases where you do not want to use steroid, such as the cyclosporin and the tacrolimus, which are the immunomodulators. So generally, if you look at the histamine blockers have 1 or 2 times dosage, whereas the mast cell stabilizers have around a 4 times dosage, along with the nafazoline, which is a vasoconstrictor. Coming to the systemic therapy, so for severe diseases, and you can give oral medicines such as levocetirizine, cetirizine, fexofenadine. Some people also give Montelukast. However, they can be severe drying of the ocular surface because of the anticholinergic properties. Future developments, we are looking, there is scope for histamine 4 receptor antagonist, intralymphatic immunotherapy, and maprocorat, which is a non-steroidal glucocorticoid receptor agonist. I have no experience with these. Coming to the next variety, that is the vernal keratoconjunctivitis. Remember, the SAC and PAC are different from VKC. So VKC can be defined as a chronic bilateral conjunctival inflammatory condition which is found in individuals predisposed by an atopic background. I repeat, predisposed by an atopic background. The mechanism over here for pathophysiology is also the type 1 hypersensitivity. However, cell-mediated immunity has also been described as a combined mechanism, but more commonly it is a type 1 variety. Now, as I said over here, now the age in contrast to them, the first variety, this generally starts before 10 years and lasts for about 2 to 10 years and generally resolves by the late puberty or the teenage. And this is more, as I said, it's more predominant in the younger ages, in warm climates. And again, also this can be a perennial incidence or peak incidence in the spring and the summer. So atopic diseases, bronchial asthma, allergic rhinitis, you need to rule them out. So this can be of 3 varieties, the palpable, limbal, and the mixed form. The palpable variety generally involves the upper tarsal conjunctiva. This is very important because the atopic conjunctivitis that I will be describing later generally involves the lower tarsal conjunctiva. Now, the palpable variety can be associated with significant corneal diseases. This is because of the contact between the inflamed conjunctiva and the corneal epithelium. Limbal variety generally is seen in Asians and blacks, and mixed is a mixed form of both. So symptoms can be severe itching. See, the early varieties of SAC and PAC had mild itching. These people have severe itching with photophobia, foreign body sensation, thick mucoid discharge is there, increased blinking or blepharospasm has also been reported. So the palpable variety generally involves the upper tarsal conjunctiva, as I had said, and you can see over here that these papillae generally have a typical cobblestone appearance, as you can see. This is what a cobblestone looks like. So in early mild disease, you can get conjunctival hyperemia or congestion, and there's mild papillary heterotopy over here. So then the next stage can be a macropapillae, which is less than 1 millimeter, as you can see. This is also a macropapillae over here. Giant papillae are generally more than 1 millimeter in size and with dividing septa. And you can have, when there's mucus in the middle, this can be a form of an intense disease. And when the disease activity decreases, you can have this congestion decreases. However, even the mucus production, as you can see over here, there's a mucus line over here. So this also reduces that. So papillae can be graded into grade 1, which includes micropapillae. Grade 2 are the macropapillae. Grade 3 are the giant papillae, which are generally 1 mm in diameter. And grade 4 are the enormous and the protruding papillae. The second variety is the limbal papillae. Now this basically starts as a thickening or an opacification of the limbus, as you can see in this picture over here. Now then what happens is it forms limbal nodules. So these limbal nodules, they start forming, and these are the limbal papillae, and then they get elevated. So these nodules get elevated, and later these nodules can coalesce and become confluent also. So you also find the presence of these dots over here. These are elevated over here, more here. These two pictures you can see. So these are the Horner-Trantos dots, which are small white elevated lesions. And these are generally a collection of the desquamated epithelial cells and the eosinophils. So extensive papillae can be seen in severe form of disease. And this is a more severe form, as you can see over here. So the keratitis or the keratopathy is another problem which is associated with BKC, and the problem is because it can interrupt a child's education, and because of permanent corneal scarring and loss of vision as well. So you can have punctate epithelial erosion. You can see these stained purplish red dots which are stained with rose bengal. Commonly you can use fluorescein also over here. And you can also see epithelial macular erosions, and when these erosions, because of the rubbing of these papillae against the corneal epithelium, you can have the development of these are macro erosions. They can later develop shield ulcers. So shield ulcers is something that looks like this because of these giant papillae. They rub and form shield ulcers on a plaque, and they have to be removed. You can also find pseudogerontoxin, as you can see over here. This is just a opacification at the limbus, and over here you can see papillae as well. So the shield ulcer has been graded into 3 types. The first type is the transparent base, which heals rapidly and is resolved by medical management. The second type is a translucent base, or an ulcer with opaque white or yellow deposits, and it requires medical management as well as debridement. And the third variety is the elevated plaque variety above the normal epithelium, and this has to be removed, or a superficial keratectomy has to be along with the medical management. So systemic risks, because we will be using steroids, will be a steroid response, glaucoma and cataract, and also associated with keratoconus. So the treatment of this can be divided into the avoidance of the allergen, topical management, systemic therapy, supportive therapy, and the surgery. So the avoidance of the allergen, as I said in SAC and PAC, is the same, and it's very important to identify those allergens and do that. Second, the topical management over here is approximately the same as the first variety. But you have to give a lot of artificial tears because the patient feels better with it. And second option can be the use of dual action, as I said, olopatadine. And generally children, because of the compliance, I prefer to give 0.2% olopatadine. Steroids have to be given. It's extremely important, particularly in severe form of the disease. But then you have to shift to prednisolone or dexamethasone. Difluprednate I myself don't use because it has a lot of high steroid response. But in such cases, a severe variety or a severe exacerbation, you have to give a high pulse dose regimen of 8 times per day, 1 week, and then you can taper it off. You can also use later on steroid sparing agents like tacrolimus and cyclosporin, but they take about 3 to 4 weeks to produce their effect. Acetylcysteine has also been described as a mucolytic agent, which dissolves the mucous filaments and deposits, and basically it addresses the early plaque formation. So topical management, and apart from that, you have to monitor the IOP, monitor the IOP because of the risk of glaucoma in such cases. Systemic therapy is again the same as I had described for SAC and PAC. Along with that, you can do desensitization, can be something that can be tried by a subcutaneous, sublingual or oral route. And basically, you're giving a lot of strong allergen over here, such that a Th2 allergy responses, you get a Th2 allergy response. Supportive therapy like climatotherapy or cold compresses are extremely important. And for persistent epithelial defect and punctate epithelial erosions, you can give a bandage contact lens. Surgery, so you can go for supratarsal steroids, cryoablation, superficial keratectomy for plaques. Now that has to be done for these shield ulcers. And remember, these shield ulcers are not infected, so you have to give steroid along with that. And then shave excision of the giant papillae has also been described. So supratarsal injection is generally given for refractory and severe cases, and 40 mg to 20 mg you give around above the superior tarsal border. And this is how you do it. So you just go above the superior tarsal border and you inject this the steroid, but you have to be very careful in such situations because people can have a very high steroid response in such cases. So shave excision, I personally do not do myself. So this has been done, yeah. So this is about it, and we can go on to the next, that is the atopic keratoconjunctivitis. So atopic is a bilateral chronic inflammatory disease of the conjunctiva and the lids. It is associated with atopic dermatitis, and it involves generally an older age group in comparison to the VKC. It occurs throughout life and is associated with eczematous skin lesions. It is a combination of type 1 and type 4 hypersensitivity reactions, and itching is the major complaint by which the patient comes, and it is similar to VKC, but it is more severe and unremitting. So they generally have severe persistent periocular itching, which is associated with dermatitis. Bronchial asthma has been seen in 65% of the patients, or allergic rhinitis also in 65% of these patients. And there's a family history of atopic disease. So coming to the skin, if you can see over here, you can have a lot of periocular scaling and flaky dermatitis with a reddened base. You can have even associated cephalococcal blepharitis, madarosis, along with keratinization of the lid margin. Few signs that I have given for academic purposes, you can note them down. Along with this, you can have lag ophthalmos, because the lid becomes, in a way, the conjunctiva becomes a little bit leather-like. You can lead to cyclical entropion formation as well, and ptosis also. You can have lateral canthal ulceration. You can have mebomitis and punctal ectropion also. And coming to this conjunctiva, you can have a discharge. Now, as mucoid discharge was seen in VKC, you will have a watery discharge over here, and congestion will be there. Papillary hypertrophy generally is seen in the inferior fornix, as you can see over here, and you can have scarring as well, keratinization, symbiophon, and as you can, this picture shows the fornix shortening, and you can have over here keratinization that is taking place at the caruncle. So limbal signs are same as VKC. Keratopathy, generally the P's involve the inferior 1/3 over here. This is a severe form of the disease because of vision loss, because of peripheral vascularization and stromal scarring, and you can also have secondary microbial ulceration in such cases. There's an increased incidence of HSV keratitis and keratoconus in such cases, and the lens can also have the anterior subcapsular or a posterior subcapsular cataract, and there's an increased risk of detachment, particularly following cataract surgery. Complications, as I said, you can have trichiasis and lid position abnormalities along with limbal stem cell deficiency. Treatment is on the same lines as we see. Apart from that, you have to go for lid hygiene and management of staphylococcal blepharitis with oral and topical antibiotics. Doxycycline can also be given. Moisturizing creams for dry and fissure skins. Steroid ointments can also be given, and oral immunosuppressives can also be added in unresponsive cases. And finally, for sequelae, you have to go for the correction of lid and ocular surface abnormalities. This is a picture. For that, you can just note this down. As I said, VKC involves the young, AKC involves the older individuals, and the VKC is more of a spring-oriented, AKC is in perennial, and the dermatitis and skin involvement is seen in atopic keratoconjunctivitis, not in VKC. The site of involvement in VKC is the upper tarsus, whereas AKC involves the lower tarsus, and scarring is more common in AKC. Shield ulcer is generally seen in VKC, however, epithelial defects are more common in AKC. Scarring is central in AKC in comparison to VKC, which is better, and vascularization, which is rare in VKC, becomes common in AKC. So this is a flowchart that you can use. Coming to the giant papillary variety. Now, this giant papillary variety is generally non-infectious inflammatory disorder. Originally, giant papillary were described as 1 millimeter, more than one, as I had said earlier. However, the new terminology defines it more than 0.3 millimeter as well. These are generally associated with the use of contact lenses, post-glaucoma surgeries, exposed sutures, prosthetics, even extruded scleral buckles, and rarely limbal dermoids. So this is because of the combined effect of mechanical trauma and the immune response to the antigens. And so basically it depends on the type, wearing schedule, and the cleaning routine, and the length of the time worn of the contact lenses. And this high incidence has been seen in extended wear contact lenses. So the early disease can be very mild, so that the patient really presents to the OPD, to a lot of blurring of vision along with persistent foreign body sensation, such that the patient decreases the contact lens wear, and finally he or she doesn't want to wear it. The ropey discharge, whitish mucoid discharge, is seen medially in the inferior fornix. You can also find substantial amount of contact lens protein deposits, and excessive contact lens mobility can also be seen due to the upper lid capture. So you can see over here, you can have these papillae that are over here. These are the giant papillae, as you can see over here. So these are generally seen in the upper tarsus. This is the sign that shows this from the satin to the uniform to the non-uniform appearance, and finally giant papillary appearance. Regarding soft contact lens, if you divide the lid into 3 zones over here, the zone near the superior tarsus is the zone 1, then the zone 2, and near the lid margin the zone 3. Soft contact lens start from zone 1 to 3, whereas the RGP go opposite from 3 to 1, whereas the other causes such as a filtering bleb or a suture can have a localized problem in that specific area, so it doesn't be in any zone. Keratopathy is rare, and ptosis can occur because of irritative spasm and tissue laxity. It is secondary to the chronic inflammation. Treatment is again on the similar lines of other allergic conjunctivitis, where you have to, but over here you have to look at the excluding the causes by which the problem is taking place, removing the stimulus, and also effective cleaning of contact lenses or processes, and finally the topical management. So sometimes while removing the stimulus, the patient should remove the contact lenses and shift to spectacles, and effective cleaning, as I said, is extremely important. And finally, in all these allergic conditions, the role of counseling is very, very important. So you have to counsel them that the treatment is going to be for a long duration, and you have to give confidence to the parents, and apart from them, explain to the risks of steroid and repeated follow-ups. Thank you so much.